Welcome to our podcast on the future of sustainable water transport. Road and rail networks are increasingly reaching their capacity limits. At the same time, the demand for environmentally friendly and efficient transport solutions is growing. This is exactly where the AUTOFLEX project comes in. By developing autonomous, sustainable, and versatile small vessels for transport on inland waterways. In this podcast, we follow the AUTOFLEX project and take a look behind the scenes of its research and development. Together with experts, we discuss innovative vessel concepts, autonomous navigation systems, sustainable propulsion technologies, and the challenges that must be overcome on the path to a new generation of water transport. Innovation on inland waterways, autonomous, flexible, sustainable. Welcome to the podcast. In today's episode, we explore the future of inland waterway transport and the role that autonomous and battery electric vehicles could play in transforming freight logistics. While autonomous shipping often captures attention as a technological breakthrough, our discussion reveals that the real challenge lies in creating integrated transport systems that connect waterways seamlessly with ports, roads, and rail networks. Together, we examine how innovation in inland shipping extends beyond the vessel itself, touching on business models, infrastructures, operational efficiency, and investment risk. From the unique constraints of river transport to the potential of smaller, more flexible vessel concepts, this conversation offers valuable insights into how automation, sustainability, and logistic integration could reshape the future of freight transport. Joining us are two experts bridging the gap between logistic research and real world maritime operations. First, we have Cyril Alias, Head of Logistics and Transportation at DST. Cyril is a leading logistics and transportation scientist specializing in inland waterway transport, port logistics, and advanced transportation systems. Alongside him is Kristoffer Kloch from DFDS. Kristoffer is an expert in maritime logistics, innovation, and sustainable transportation. He is currently managing AUTOFLEX, a large-scale innovation project aimed at revolutionizing waterborne transport.
So coming from a background from primarily ocean or short sea shipping, I think what is very unique with inland waterways from sort of my experience is that if I wanted to go to whichever port I wanted to go to in the world, I could more or less design the ship however I want it in terms of dimensions, provided that I can enter the port. So the what we call it, the restricting parameter is the port, right? The port dimensions, you have a lock, etc., etc. With inland waterways, it is not the port at all, it's actually the waterway itself. So even if you had, let's say, enormous amounts of volumes, you would not necessarily be able to create a big ships because the waterway itself is small, right?
Actually, for ocean people, it's interesting to look at Rio La Plata in Argentina.
Yes.
Because that's a very nice comparison to how inland people think. If you want to enter Rio La Plata and not stay outside and then use these smaller ships to move into Buenos Aires and Montevideo, you can only call at Santos and then that's it, and you return. And basically that's what the inland vessel designers face every day.
Yeah.
Because and then the river system Rhine is different from the waterway system Danube or Elbe or Rhone or Maas.
Okay.
Because the riverbed is different, the stream characteristics is different, even the water source is different. The Rhine is sourced from the Alps, the Danube is not, or not that much, and not in that sense because it's elsewhere.
Yeah.
So it's also...
Another thing we've worked with in AUTOFLEX is these supportive transport concepts, because from a very sort of point of departure, we recognize that just making a ship And we'll come into the idea of autonomous ship, because the ship we're talking about specifically is autonomous and battery electric, which in itself are also innovations, sort of parameters. But to say that apart from just the ship itself being something, the ship has to be deployed within a larger transport system. Mm-hmm. This comes off sort of the results of previous EU-funded projects we both have been involved in, also recognizing the business of a company like DFDS, the business of a company like doorstep, which we've talked with, that you have a transport asset, in this case a ship, which has to be integrated into a transport system.
Indeed.
Right?
And for inland waterways, this is a really big shift. Okay. You know, the usual inland waterway transport, traditional inland waterway transport is you go somewhere empty with your bathtub, you fill it, bathtub, and you go elsewhere and you dump it completely. So it's a unimodal O to D, origin to destination transport. That's it. No different transport legs, no different transport modes. And now we end up in the year 2026, in global supply chains. You know, actually, you organize a transport chain like a relay in the Olympics. Huh? So somebody is carrying the stick, and then you can hand it over as smooth and neat as possible. And you know, it's basically that. And inland waterway is not completely there. There is a container transport evolving over the last 20, 25 years, and you can see systems integrated. But still, if you look at road transport, if you look at ocean transport, there is a lot to learn still. Huh? I mean, there are river systems like the Rhine where things work properly. I've been part of the PIANC working group, a global working group, a couple of years ago, and we published a report to learn how they organize it on the Rhine, to transfer it to Paraguay, to Southern Africa, to the Mekong River, you know, elsewhere in the world. So even in Europe, I mean, even colleagues from the Danube trying to learn. So this is working somewhere, yes, but it's not common knowledge yet. And look at intermodal transport chains elsewhere. They are much more integrated. So we're in the learning process. That's a mentality shift, but it also lacks systemic support. We don't have the systems, IT systems, to book it in one stretch. Transshipment systems allowing a direct cargo transfer from transport A to transport mode B. Yeah? Also, you know, the organizational connection between waterway systems and road systems, for example, or waterway systems and other waterborne systems like ocean-going systems. Look at the big European seaports. That is not exactly harmonized.
Yeah, it's for me, again, it's very interesting, this conundrum that you also have in the seaport with, even if you want to do modal shift, let's say you have a big vessel coming into Antwerp and you want to get all the containers on that ship in Antwerp sort of onwards into the European ecosystem. The barging that we experience a lot of operational conundrums in terms of delays, especially for the smaller vessels to the bigger terminals where the big containers come in. And I think it's very interesting this, because we're talking about integrated transport system. Again, keeping aside this idea of autonomy and green, the fact of just doing more integrated transport system is something that's, I don't know if I can make sort of a bold general statement that it is missing, but I at least see in some of our operation that it could be wildly improved, you know.
Way before I started at DST, so 2012, 2011, something like that, there was this project for Cargo, where the Ruhrgebiet, which is one of the most industrialized areas in Germany, between Duisburg and Dortmund, was supposed to be served with a shuttle service, let's call it a shuttle, actually a convoy system that would allow container transport between the container terminal in Dortmund at the port and the one in Duisburg, which is on the Rhine, and then, you know, used as a hub to Rotterdam, to Antwerp, and so on. It failed. Why did it fail? Because transport costs didn't materialize. So a couple of years later, 6, 7 years later, when there was a second project, a national project again, Decontrans, where the same idea was deployed, but this time not with a convoy system, but with smaller units, self-propelled units, so motor cargo vessels, but smaller ones, so that this utilization problem, which was the reason why the first approach didn't materialize, simply because utilization was not possible to obtain. Then said, okay, let's scale things down. Let's try with a smaller vessel where it appears easier to get that filled. Yeah. And then, of course, this promise, okay, maybe cost structures might change, which is then AUTOFLEX. Because cost structures might change because of automation, because of different personnel costs on board or different operating times. Let's assume that one day that it is fully automated, whatever that means, level 3, level 4, level 4 plus, whatever, but 24-hour operation.
Yes.
Yeah. Different uptimes as well. It's not just about having people on board. That's one part, but you need people somewhere, even in the rock, on board, in the ports, God knows. But at least the operational time changes, so you're much more productive. That's the assumption. Huh?
Yeah.
So that's what we are investigating in this project, and we already think about the next steps, where maybe this control is decentralized. It's not a centralized organization, it's a decentralized. But it's a chain of developments. Why? To make waterborne transport, for example, as a feeder service, possible.
Yeah.
And today that's not possible.
Yes, and I think especially this, coming at it from all the business perspective, this thing of having assets which are operational, or maximizing the operational span of that asset, I think is quite underappreciated actually, because if we look at this short sea ship, it is not stopping. I'm a former seafarer myself, It's not stopping, it's constantly going. The inland waterways ships are a little bit different, maybe also because you have these captains that are self-owned.
Totally. Totally.
So it's a little bit of a different thing, but I think this, if I'm just looking at this from myself, if you bought a car, and of course most people don't use their car 100% of the time. The car, I think I saw an EU report where you use your car 3% of the time, and the rest is in the garage, But essentially, if you buy an asset, an expensive asset even, which is a ship, you want to use it all the time,
I mean, we're here at the TRA in Budapest, and we just came out of an industrial roundtable, as they called it, and there was a representative of Wizz Air there.
Yeah.
The big revolution that the low-cost carriers, especially in Europe, managed to accomplish is to have a much more much more positive ratio of productive time to total time of operation. And because if you look at the Wizz Air or Ryanair or EasyJet, whatever, they land. They have, 30 minutes, 40 minutes on ground, and then they return. So it is coming twice or maybe even 3 times a day to Budapest and leaving to I don't know where. So, and compare that to a vessel. It is coming and it's staying. Okay, it's not easy to change the system. That's not what I'm saying. But there is this different type of thinking. It's not me, my home, and I have done one transport order, now I can go to sleep. No, it's in constant operation because utilization needs to be driven high.
Yeah.
Because the driver is somebody else than the operator.
Yes.
So the operator is suffering. It's not a nice life. So we are changing the structure of the work.
And it's actually interesting, sorry for talking, but it's actually interesting that might be where the bigger issue or the bigger sort of hurdle to get over is sort of organizational transformation rather than getting the numbers right, whether this makes money from a business perspective or whether the technology actually does what it's supposed to do. It seems from what I hear you say, Cyril, that it's way more around sort of some of the structural inertia, in lack of a better word.
It could be. Well, let me fast forward. I'm not saying I'm a prophet and this is how it is going to happen, but it could happen that, let's say, an industrial company says, now with these rock operators as a service, I can buy this. I can hire 2 captains, ship masters. I can buy all the equipment for a rock, and then I myself am operating 2 vessels. And then my take on this might be very different because I'm an industrial company, consignor, and I want to maximize utilization of my vessels. So minimum dwell times in the ports, maximum acceleration of the transshipment processes, everything else, ship handling in general, as lean as possible, maybe on board, maybe during the transshipment, reorganized and at least at some point, but all with the goal of having more or less breakless back and forth shuttles.
Yeah.
And I can tell you that, for example, the big steel company, TIS, is doing it in that way. The push convoy is coming, leaving the barges there, dismantling and returning while there is a port push boat that is taking over and taking care of the rest. But the one on the river is already gone while this is being settled in the port.
Yeah, that's interesting. So then you sort of disconnect essentially
That's the point.
the ship part or the propulsion part of and the cargo the part of the ship. We had talks in the beginning of the AUTOFLEX on doing this too, and then we didn't go that way. Also for like various naval architectural reasons, which I will admit I'm not a naval architect, so I don't know. But I think it's interesting this, and I think it's particularly interesting in this. And without going on a rant here, but in the context of economies of scale,
Totally.
where everyone want to buy big and bigger vessels, bigger cranes or whatever, to actually look into what we call the opposite, the diseconomy of scale. I don't know what to call it, the economy of decentralization maybe, or it's a scale another way maybe, because one CMT class 2 vessel, an AUTOFLEX vessel, might not be able to do anything on its own. But if you scale it and have multiple vessels,
like the swarm.
in a swarm sense, integrated into an ecosystem where you they work together, I think it's a novel take on a transport system.
And definitely, I fully endorse it. And I think it more resembles what market structures look like. You are much more flexible, because it's not designed to serve only, but then in a big chunk, Rotterdam-Duisburg. So then you have a big type of vessel, like Letitia, for example, operating on the right, and then Rotterdam-Duisburg, Rotterdam-Duisburg, Rotterdam-Duisburg. But further down south, impossible.
Yeah, okay.
Not really useful to go to Alkmaar, to the north, because too big. But perfect for this well-utilizing. If market structures should change one day, and heaven forbid, but this happened a couple of times in the last 2,000 years. So if things change, you're not able to use this vessel in a useful sense anymore.
Yeah.
In that sense, being more flexible, more adaptive to market changes is, how do businesses evolve? There's an anchor customer coming with a decent amount of cargo. Then, since the service is in place, some others join, then you add up the volume, then you all of a sudden need a bigger vessel, then you move from SEM 2 to 3 or 4, then that's not sufficient, you move to 5. That's how things go. But this first phase, if you have a SEM 5 vessel, you are confined to those areas. So this starting period where you can attract people to in a waterway cannot happen. We've had this in the Decontrans project. We went to the ports of Dortmund, to Gelsenkirchen, Essen. You've been there as well.
Yeah.
And in Gelsenkirchen, for example, they told us, okay, I have customers here who are situated here at the port. They would love to use the port. They expect 7-8 containers a week, 8 containers a week. But nobody's coming from the big liners on the Rhine for 8 containers a week.
Of course.
So what happens? They send it on a truck. So there is demand, but there's no supply.
To play the devil's advocate on that, sorry for interrupting, Cyril,
Yeah.
isn't it a high investment to invest in a SEM2 ship, finding out that there's more volumes, and then have to reinvest in a SEM4 ship and get rid of your SEM2 ship?
Which leads me to your convoy system.
Okay, explain more. Yeah.
Because you have a certain barge size. Of course, you could also change the barge size itself. I mean, it's not out of this world. Nobody does that, but there are certain standard sizes of barges, 70 meters, 100 meters, something like that. But it's about filling that barge. So in convoy transport, it's quite usual to have 3 containers and the rest bulk.
Oh yeah.
That sounds a bit peculiar for all the other transport modes, especially at TRA. They would look at us like, what are they talking about? But it's actually normal to have half your bathtub with grain, and there are 7 containers at the other end of it. And it's even possible, because it's not the typical gantry crane that you expect in some Danubian port, but it's a reach stacker or some crane that helps you to lift these containers off the vessel. But it's more like a project rather than a standardized container handling. Once business picks up, So same argumentation line than what I just said about the vessel is that if things pay off, you can invest into a costly and maintenance intense crane, but only if you have the volume for it. You don't invest first in the crane and then wait for the cargo. You must be quite stupid for that. Oh, there is public funding and they send away the money. I mean, you see a lot of these ports, eh? Oh, let's build a crane and then cargo will come. I've been to so many ports in this world where exactly that happened. Like having the crane is the hope for, okay, now.
But do you think it's a chicken and egg thing then, or do you think it starts somewhere?
I personally think it only works with cargo involved. Somebody trying this first and then all the rest of the physical ecosystem happens. I mean, there may be isolated cases where you first built the port and then cargo came.
Yeah.
Might be. But coming from Duisburg, guys, that's been a port for 300 years or whatever. But it's been the cargo, and then with the growing demand for transshipment, of course, then let's put another crane there, and yet another one, and another terminal, and yet another. Now we have 17 terminals in the city. But they were not there, and then people were waiting for cargo. No, it's been a reaction to growing volumes. And be assured, when the demand is decreasing again, we will see also terminals closing. I mean, why would you open or keep it open for whom?
Right, which leads us to potentially to another part of AUTOFLEX. We talked about the transport components before.
Yeah.
I would say myself, but I think a lot of us see as one of the big issues or conundrums here is de-risking the investment. Sure, there's like de-risking the safety risk of a ship, God forbid, hitting another ship or hitting sort of third-party assets or even pedestrians in some cases that shouldn't in any way sort of be harmed by logistics efforts. So there's obviously that, but I think what is probably even more important, and it sounds like I'm this cold capitalist person that don't care about human lives, but what is probably even more important from a implementation perspective is whether or not I can de-risk myself financially. What I mean by that is, instead of building one ship which is massive, could I build smaller ships which I can easily get rid of? And it goes back to this flexibility concept again, which I think I will need to have a conversation with your colleague Igor Bashkalov on this, because flexibility means, of course, that you can operate a ship on many different rivers. Igor and the rest of that sort of work on the ship design has also looked into a ship that could be used for containers, but also for bulk or for other things, potentially general cargo, project cargo, etc. What I'm also sort of trying to claim is that you want a ship that is flexible in the sense that you can get rid of it again. Because if I have to buy something, it's the same if you buy a house, right? If you buy a house that is very peculiar and very expensive, maybe you are a little bit more hesitant to buying it because you're like, oof, how do I get out of this again, right? But if you buy a sort of normal house, you can quite a standard thing, you can quite easily get out of it again. And I think that is, don't know if it's lacking or whether it's just my lack of understanding of shipping, but I feel like I've not heard that way of thinking too much when we talk about modal shift, inland waterways, autonomous vessels, et cetera, et cetera. It's very much like I go all in because I need the business case to be 1,000% tight before.
And that's related to the usual time of use of a period of use. I mean, if you take a truck, normally you use it between 3 and 7 years. On the Rhine, you have vessels that are 70 years old. 70 years,
yeah.
70 years of age. That's not, I mean, you normally think of 30 years, but still there are more than, I mean, I've been on such rusty buckets, which is impressive, isn't it? I mean, okay, maybe Adolf Hitler was on this vessel or Otto von Bismarck, you know, it's really, really an old vessel. At least Konrad Adenauer could have been the first chancellor. You know, it's really, really, really old. And now think of innovation cycles. I mean, think of the engine class of 1955, and which is still operating 71 years later. Who wants this then? So of course the thinking is different because virtually there is no real case of selling it off, except for the case that let's say you go bankrupt and somebody else takes over your business. You don't have to go bankrupt. You sell your company, and then somebody takes over your business. We've seen that lately with Soja taking over a big inland tanker vessel company in Germany, and they use buses. So fine. So then you buy everything, including the fleet. Fine. But the plan is okay. Operate further because you've had this renovation of all these inland tanker vessels because of this double hull regulation. So they are not that old. We're not talking about 70 years. The tanker vessels are frequently much younger, 30 years, 35 years, something like that, because it was early 90s. So there are another 30 years, and don't forget, maybe the first 10 years are for rentability, and the rest of it is now for earning money.
Yeah.
So now is the time you make money. Why would you sell it off? Why?
Yeah, I think it was Stefan Krause from ISC, who was also involved in the project, who told me that the ROI on inland barge is like 32 years. Is that true?
I checked that. What I heard is 15.
50, okay, but even if it's 15,
Yeah.
it's enormously higher.
Indeed.
Short sea shipping is just a handful of years,
Indeed.
So again, if you have to do an investment where it takes 15 or 30 years, or anything between those two numbers to create the return on investment, it's seen as quite a high investment risk, right? So
that's the reason. I mean,
how do you think autonomy will play into this? Because some people that sort of have spent a lot of years researching autonomy talk about operational OPEX reductions, which could be true, and of course a lot of what, not that we have to go into ship financing and such, but a lot of what determines the return on investment is also your operational expenses, right? So when essentially do you recuperate your investment? And if it is true that autonomy can sort of decrease your OPEX quite a lot, there might be an argument, and you will have to do the numbers obviously, but there might be an argument actually that could decrease your ROI, provided that whatever capital expense, CAPEX, you need to use on outfitting the autonomy, and whatever additional potential operational expense you get from having systems on board, data transfers, or ashore, rock, et cetera, those combined could potentially be an argument for decreasing the return on investment.
Indeed. And I fully understand. So that's a prerequisite to at least think about it. But we've only looked at the vessel operator.
Yeah.
And the assumption here is that this cost reduction will be passed on to the customer. So I can offer my service for a lower fare because I'm not spending that much per ride, per voyage, per kilometer, whatever. And that's what I can pass on to the customer, who thinks then that inland waterways is more attractive than it used to be before, maybe even competitive with road and rail and blah, blah, blah. And then you see a certain effect of modal shift. But, and I'm a bit outspoken on this, even within the community, because as a logistician, I don't only think vessel.
Yeah.
There are systems, I should start differently. There are people on board that are obviously doing something. And we found in one of our projects that obviously it's 27 different vessel operational tasks they're fulfilling. Actually, you need a replacement of all 27, if that is the final number. Yeah. Maybe smarter people than us might have found out 3 more and it's 30, yes. Or who God knows, or maybe it's 40, whatever. But let's say 20, or maybe it's just 20, whatever, but it's more than one. Yeah. Navigation. But we're focusing on navigation, aren't we?
Yes.
Sometimes we talk about mooring, sometimes we're talking about bunkering, but then we have max 3. Yeah. We're talking about 27. What about the other 24? If I just say 100,000 investment, CAPEX, on top of a €5 million vessel for each of these functions. I don't know the solutions, sometimes it's 200,000, sometimes 20,000, but on average, 100,000 per function. So you all of a sudden have a 7.7 million vessel instead of a 5 million vessel, just because you don't like people and wanted to get rid of them. 7.7. Can anyone tell me how much would a captain, a shipmaster, and his crew earn as salary to make this work?
So is your claim that autonomy doesn't make sense?
I'm talking about full automation.
Okay.
And that's the point here. Full automation requires everything reorganized. In my example, I've replaced everything with technical solutions. Who says that we need to do that?
Yeah.
We could also reorganize things, less investment, but maybe with a shift of responsibilities. Why not more from land side? It's not your responsibility as a shipmaster anymore. It's a service you can buy from me, port operator, or from him, third party.
Yeah.
Could be. It costs you money, but at least there is no capital investment on any side. Other than that was already there. Somebody needs to have bollards on the shore side. Somebody needs to have ropes on board, and then that's it. Because today we're talking about robots and magnets and I don't know what. Okay, but somebody needs to pay this.
Yeah, exactly. So take a sort of parallel into some of the innovation projects we've had in the truck side of things, or even in the terminals with truck masters. What you quite often see is that the driving all these sort of things are, I wouldn't say they're easy, but those are solvable. What seems to be still one of the big hurdles is connecting the trailer. The manual work of connecting a trailer to a truck is tricky. The people we're working with, companies without mentioning names, have not fully found out how to do that. You know,
we've been discussing this for 5 years now, with varying intensity. Okay, how about connecting convoys? So there is this push boat, and there are these barges. How to ensure communication, technical communication, how to ensure physical connection, and also releasing the connection. How to do that? There is a reason why people focus on motor cargo vessels.
But I think it's interesting because as you're saying, you can essentially make not necessarily the whole chain, just sort of bring it back to AUTOFLEX, right? You don't not necessarily make the whole chain autonomous, automated. There's also a definition thing there to what we mean when we say autonomous. Without being all philosophical.
Yeah, but to break it there, the levels of automation refer to navigation.
Yeah.
Not the other levels.
No, yeah, I know. It's just my pet peeve. Is this, I'm saying it quite often to people, and they laugh a little bit with me. I don't know. No, yeah. But it's just from a very philosophical perspective, and it might be sort of a linguistic observation more than sort of an operational observation. But we used to have captains in global shipping back in the age of sail, where the captain either owned fully his or her, often his, fortunately, but owned their, let's say, own vessel, or at least partly owned their own vessel. Yeah. And that was because you essentially needed someone, it's principal agent theory in economy. You need someone who sort of makes decisions for the good of the company. Right? So that makes sense back then. That's very rarely the case today. It happens on inland waterways sometimes, which is interesting. Decreasingly still, you know, and that's another conversation because we talk about some of these independent waterway operators, and they say it's very difficult to find the funding to create new ships, which means they might just have to sell the ships they have and then either buy an old ship or stop sailing, which is another fortunate development. But that's another sort of conversation. And then we went away from that to having employees that were not sort of principal agents in the same way, that at least they didn't all have ownership of the ship. And you increasingly sent orders from a main office or a regional office, wherever it was, to the ship on how the ship should operate. What I always sort of my pet peeve with autonomy is I don't think, because back in the age of sail, when you have captains that were owning the ship, they could make autonomous decisions because you didn't have internet. Yeah. So sharing information to the Caribbean, for instance, or to wherever it was, would take forever. So you needed to allow the captains to make their own decisions. Then it came the age of information, where we can share information very, very quickly. All of a sudden you can tell people within sort of a minute or even a second what to do. So you sort of took away a lot of that, my claim is at least, you took away a lot of the autonomy from the ships. Sure. They became automated or reactive, and now we're talking autonomous ships, and I know it might be a linguistic observation, not an operational observation, but you effectively don't want them to be autonomous because we're moving away from it. You want them to do predefined things very, very particularly. You know?
We have a strong tendency towards centralized planning and centralized monitoring. Yeah? There is a general optimized plan how things should work. So those among us who are a bit longer in the industry know you can plan whatever you want, and then you leave your ramp, and the first disruption starts there. It goes on until the very last mile. So it's purely coincidence if things go just the way you've planned them before.
Yeah.
So autonomy, decentralized decision making is important. and that happens. My claim is people are lying. Are simply lying. I mean, you claim, I've made this plan, and then all of a sudden your truck driver calls you and says, okay, I'm in the congestion here, and there's a 45-minute delay, and there's a danger of me not meeting the closing date in Antwerp. Gone is your plan, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, and then it's maybe a negotiation kind of thing, what to do now. So, gone is your plan.
Yeah, no, completely.
So,
we have this captain who, principal agent theory, they would partly own and operate the ship on behalf of the ship owner. What I want to get at is this thing of like the automation of the entire system and how humans often become the glue in between. Because I think it's such an important point that having the autonomous ship, the autonomous port terminal, the autonomous truck, and everything just moves seamlessly. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I think, at least from a sort of commercial perspective, there's a high amount of risk involved with this. But I don't see why a ship potentially, like the transport aspect of a ship, couldn't be made autonomous. I know you say as a seafarer is doing maybe, again, I'm a former seafarer, do 30 other things on board, but there's nothing that says that those tasks necessarily have to be done on board, depending on what the tasks are, right? A lot of what I did when I was sailing was responding to emails, sort of like predicting when we'll
painting.
be... Yeah, painting
a lot of
as well,
painting.
sure. Yeah. But I also mean like on the commercial side, it's like the planning thing, the sharing information, all this sort of stuff. Yeah. The maintenance of the painting and etc. of the ship, which doesn't necessarily have to be done. I mean, it's difficult to paint a ship remotely, but at least you don't have to necessarily do it on the voyage.
Look at aircraft; they do it not during flight. Huh? They do that when they're on ground. So exactly. You can reorganize things. Of course, that comes with a price that things change. If you don't like change, then leave everything as it is.
Yeah.
And sometimes even change does not come for the better. That's also part of it. So don't pursue that one, okay? But at least think things through.
And I think the airplane argument is so good, because I've talked with a quite large European shipyard on this, and they're already now saying like, if we could start doing ships a little bit more like planes, which means instead of repairing things on board, you do sort of like take it out, put it back in.
Yes.
Because that's what you do with airplanes. You know, they might have, I don't know enough about airplanes, but they might have like routine maintenance that happens once per year.
They do.
But if I have a problem with my wheel on an airplane, I'm not fixing it there. I'm taking the wheel off, I'm putting the other wheel on, as you say, with Ryanair, and then I'm off on the again, right?
True.
And so what I wanted to hint at here towards the end of this is this thing with like the automation of the whole thing. One of the whole transport chain, and ship versus port versus terminal, etc. One of the things I want to talk about is the mobile distribution center. And I want to talk about it in the following context. We are today having trucks, right? Which are driving around with quite often part loads. What I mean by that is, or you have sort of consolidated part loads, which means not necessarily everything within the truck's cargo is for one customer. It might be for 3 different customers. You have a truck driver that sort of, to my understanding at least, orchestrates that. What I mean by that, it means he drives to the first location, he takes off, let's say, 1/3 of the content of the truck, because that 1/3 was meant for the first customer. Then that truck driver continues onwards to the second customer, takes another 1/3 off, final customer, last 1/3 off, and in that way, the truck driver sort of becomes the one coordinating all the part loads. Yeah. How does that look like in an autonomous world?
Well, it remains to be seen. So far, we didn't see any concept exactly for this cause. So we had this workshop with you, with the colleagues from Syntef, and also with other colleagues at our institute. How could we reorganize things to make this happen? So to replace the truck driver, because there's no truck driver in that leg anymore. So how does a system needs to look like to mimic that, to resemble this? And then we learned, okay, there are different things. Dispensing the cargo is one aspect. So not everyone accessing everything. No. Like, who are you? You are customer number A. You will get the first 3 pallets. Here you are. And who are you? You're customer number B. The other 12 are for you. Well, this is the role of the driver, obviously, apart from driving.
And which goes back to this, your claim that a driver, whether of a truck or ship, does more than just
Absolutely.
the navigation
Absolutely.
of the vehicle.
We
right?
call him driver because that's what we see. Well, it was maybe the biggest chunk. I even doubt that partly, but okay. But it's way more than that. For example, he has the guard function. He is making sure that nobody steals things.
Right.
So security is an issue.
Yeah.
Handling, I mean, physically handling is an issue. It's not just driving things, but also fetching things out from your ramp and then pulling it somewhere. Using the aids for that, a manual truck or a forklift or whatever. So there's a bunch of roles, and then the idea was to replace one by one. Since we have a focus on container transport, we try to fit it in a container. If we look for railroad transports one day, why not go for trailer? But for the time being, the 22 to 24 pallets that you normally can fit into a container was our base.
And you could also even argue that even in a row context, there could be containers on trailers.
Oh, indeed, yeah. Well, I was just thinking of trailers because there you can use 33 pallets, and so for somebody the capacity is bigger.
And I also think it's less than 10% of road-borne transport, which is actually containerized. The rest is trailers inside. So you're actually right. I was just to say that it doesn't necessarily only have to be on a waterborne modality.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, this concept now is also combinable with rail transport.
Yeah, for instance. Yes.
It could be possible actually. Or we talked about this for short sea shipping on the Greek islands, for example. So there are different ideas how to pursue this.
Sorry, I derailed us. So a container.
The idea is now that you have this, let's say, unsolicited unit that needs to be operated by the user, which is the person, the customer who expects cargo. So he would approach, or she would approach the MDC, the Mobile Distribution Center, with a UI code, something, and then this container is compartmentalized. So there are, let's say, 22 different slots or 15. It depends on the size. It can be 20 or 40 or 45, but container pallet wide ideally. And then you have this one compartment with a roller shutter door or some sort of opening. We're thinking of roller shutter doors, but deeper technical analysis might yield that that's not the best solution. There's another one. Okay. But for the time being, we're thinking about roller shutter doors that would automatically open only that compartment where your cargo is stored.
Yeah.
So, and then there's a certain logic in how to load it, not one by one, door by door. So you have this container, and then you have, let's say, 11 side doors per side. And then you have 22 openings that you all fit the containers. Would drive you crazy in the depot. It needs to be filled at once, very efficiently, with the main doors where you normally open a container. And then only retrieval by the individual customer is allowed.
And who would be the customer? Would that be someone like you buying Nike shoes online? Or
I don't see that because so far, I'm now 42 years old. So
I don't know why I use Nike shoes next time, but
not because of your shoes.
Sorry.
No, but normally private people don't expect pallets unless you buy a home and then you have your bunch of marble stones or something.
Yeah,
normally,
fair enough. Floor tile. Yeah.
But we were focusing on B2B.
Yes.
Customers, especially in certain areas like where we are situated in the rural area in Germany, but also in the Netherlands and in parts of Belgium, also north of France, we'll see that as well. A lot of industrial parks, logistics parks, industrial zones along the water. Because of these historical reasons, blah, 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 so what we discussed earlier. So there's a lot of economic activity along the waterways, sometimes also using the waterway. So, but then also, the need of cargo is next to this waterway. Next meaning geographically, physically next to the waterway. So if you offload such a container, an MDC container, to the shore side, the way to the final point of destination, which could be a production warehouse, something, is not kilometers away. We're talking about a couple of meters, let's say 400 meters. If you've been to bigger industrial sites, 400 meters is what the people in forklifts regularly use.
Yeah.
So, and that's even coming by foot is not out of this world. I mean, it really happens. So people coming with their manual truck, And
because I'm also thinking, even if you have space for a pallet, that doesn't mean you couldn't still use it for something else.
And we even have that.
Yeah.
We created a little mock-up in our lab, which is a 10-foot container, and then we have these rolling containers that they use in retail, or also in parcel business.
Yes.
We have, of course,
Like
the
these
pallets.
cage sort of
Yeah,
things,
indeed. We could also think of barrels for
brewery or whatever.
Yeah, it is breweries and restaurants and event locations, something like that.
How many compartments did you say it was?
I think it was 22, but I didn't check it. Yeah.
Okay, 20. Let's say 22. And essentially, the compartment is the size so that you can put a pallet inside for the maximum dimensions, but you can put anything inside.
I mean,
right?
if you have not a pallet, but let's say something that is 3 pallets wide, and then you have a bigger opening and 3 pallets wide. So that's also one of the things. We're talking about standardized containers that need to be reframed a bit or tailored a bit, but that's possible. I mean, we're talking about steel work, simply modified a bit. We're not talking about a high-tech thing. During the project, we were talking about retrieval, how to retrieve this. And one of the ideas was we have one central entry and retrieval point where people would come up to, enter their code, and then...
I mean, on the container, you have like a touch screen sort of thing.
Something like
okay,
a panel for the user. You would use that, and then something happens inside. It could be a crane, it could be a mobile robot taking up the pallet and then driving it to the retrieval entry or exit. It could be, a type of a conveyor belt, whatever.
Right, yeah.
But think of these systems means there's a lot of technical installation inside, which makes things very costly.
And all of a sudden it doesn't work. And then if you have one experience, I would argue as a customer, and it doesn't work, you're like, okay, I tried it, doesn't work, we'll go back.
Just let it break down twice, gone is your customer.
Yeah.
And let 3 customers leave, gone is your business model.
So you're saying minimize sort of moving parts, which ironically is a little bit also what a lot of autonomous ship people would say. It's like, don't put the crane on board, minimize things on board the ship, move some of these 20, 30 tasks that the crew is doing
to other parties,
to shore, and then keep the ship as stupid, which sounds ironic in like intelligent
Smart
autonomous
shipping.
ship, but keep the ship as stupid as you can, and as far as you can at least, and then push other tasks ashore, right? So what you're saying essentially, this mobile distribution center, which is a container MDC, has to be as intelligently stupid or stupidly intelligent. I don't know how we have to coin it.
Let's call it lean. I mean, as lean as possible, because if you're overloaded with functions, and we are all technicians and in one way or the other nerds, so we like things. It's moving, it's brilliant, it's robot, it's blah, but we should be guided by the customer. Is it required, or is it because I like to see that happening? Oh, it moves on a robot arm, but nobody asked for it. Nobody will pay for it. So that's one thing. And a final remark, there is a general trend to onload a lot of new functions, automated functions, which moves this vision of we call it the floating Swiss knife. It can do everything.
Yes.
But just think of it that what I just tried to sketch with my computation, 7.7 million in that example.
Yeah.
Right? So who is paying for this extra feature?
Yes.
And the truth is nobody. And we're here at the transport research arena. Here people know. They all fight with their customers for amounts that are ridiculous.
Yeah.
And we're talking about 2.7 million in my example.
Yeah.
Nowhere, never.
So you're essentially saying, so if we don't have any sort of moving parts in this MDC, what is inside?
Compartments. There are different ways to compartmentalize this. Our approach is, because we need to load it, and we wanted to avoid this individual loading, like these little bird homes where you feed each pellet in each opening, which kills you. It kills efficiency maximum. So the idea is to have, let's say, a cassette of 22 units that can be then opened once you shove it in and close the door. Can be approached individually without allowing access to any other compartment.
like the truck driver used to do.
Indeed,
Yeah.
that's the guard function that we
Yes.
want to mimic. Since we don't have a person, there's now a physical structure disallowing any other access than the one granted to you by your code. That's basically the
So
thing
like a
there.
parcel locker, to put it very, very simple.
Indeed, that is the vision. It's the B2B parcel locker, what we're thinking of here.
Yeah.
With certain constraints because of the size and the weight of the cargo, the structure of the business. But yeah, indeed, it's exactly that. Keep it as simple as possible.
And have you tested this with some of the customers in your?
Not yet.
I mean, not the concept, but the idea of.
I don't even
improving.
the concept, and we have
Okay.
people coming there, and we, now that the mock-up is there, we are in this phase of testing this with people. I mean, it's a mock-up, eh?
Yeah.
So the next step would be to have a demonstrator, really with something built with a couple of 10,000 euros, really building something, let's say a 20-foot container, and then really testing it in a real setting, maybe in one of these industrial parks in Duisburg, or maybe in the city center. I doubt whether anyone wants to see container transshipment downtown in a beautiful, I mean, here in Budapest, you're sitting at this beautiful parliament building and you really want to see container handling there on the premise of the parliament, really? I don't see that. But in other areas, in other cities, it could very well work.
I mean, you know my view on this, because the DFDS terminal in the center of Copenhagen has been moved outside of Copenhagen back in the early 2000s. And now it's called Ophelia Place. It's a very nice place, which is sort of not really used for anything. It's sort of like I call my presentation from port to plaza, like in a Spanish sense, but it's just sort of this area that is not really used for anything. Sometimes it's used for a concert. If there's a World Cup, they put up a few screens and that sort of stuff. But you actually have, and that's during the day then when people are awake and it can use as a public space. But during night, it's not used for anything. And for me, that would be an obvious place to sail in, drop off a few containers during night. And if you could do it as quietly as possible, electrification would help with that. Row will help with that, but that's another conversation. Then you essentially have to just gate off that area at night, and then in the morning you remove the gate, or you open the gate, whatever you want to call it, and then all the businesses in the center of Copenhagen, could be Nyhavn, this famous sort of place in Copenhagen with all the colorful houses and all the different restaurants. It's just next door. Yeah. They can drive they can even walk if you want to be lazy, you know, or not lazy, but like if you don't have a vehicle. But anyway, you can drive in a minute or 2 minutes, pick up, as you say, your beer, your fresh produce, your whatever it is that you need for your restaurant or for your business in general, and then deliver it. Because what happens today is you have trucks coming in doing normal work hours between 8 to 5, clocking up the whole thing. It's a nightmare, you know. So in those sort of cases, I think this, and then that is the B2B, right? It's like, it's not to a person at home.
Yeah.
But I agree with you, and also,
it depends a bit on the geographic structure as well. Huh?
Yeah.
If everything is condensed at one, let's say a concentric structure of the city, you have all the traffic access leading to one point, and then you add this function there. That's a bit different. In many port cities, you see that the port city, and then the end of the basin is always where the mayor sits, and the big shopping mall is, and then the big plaza and everything. I've been to Bergen with a colleague from Sintef, and then we were sitting there and having our whale steak, and what you do when you know it. And then all of us, a beautiful summer evening, and then we have exactly this thought. And you want to see here container transport, really?
Yeah.
Impossible, eh? So that's basically one of the problems that we see here. But in a city like Cologne, where they have several industrial ports in the city area, would perfectly make sense. We have this this discussion with you guys in Hamburg, our colleagues from AUTOFLEX, who did a study on this already. Huh? Okay, there the vessel size is an issue, but the accessibility of the transshipment points was not. There are plenty of them.
No, and that's what we said in the very beginning of this conversation, which might be actually the way we sort of end this by tying that knot, is that it seems that this is more of a organizational, sort of sectorial transformation problem. I don't want to use the word problem necessarily, but that's where the hurdle, there's a challenge. That's where the hurdle lies more than whether it's technology, whether the business case holds. I mean, of course, the business case have to hold, otherwise it makes no sense, you know. But
have to be viable anyway. Yeah.
But I think I mean, a lot of the business is also the willingness of the customer to go left or right. You know, if you saw, maybe less now, I saw a piece of news this morning that Maersk, the big Danish shipping company, is struggling a little bit with getting an uptake on this new biogas ship, the dual fuel ships that they've bought. But even the 300 companies that signed up originally, they were willing to pay a bit of a premium for having that service, you know. So it's not that everything necessarily has to be cheaper and cheaper and cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. There could be other parameters that incentivize customers to go in that direction, but you just have to just say, incentivize it. Sort of doing the political work of selling, and I'm sort of doing, you know, selling could be many things, but like selling the idea to that uptake, I think.
And we will see probably how things can also work in a viable way. Normally in logistics, what you see a lot of times is closed loops help. One person investing and earning, or investing and benefiting.
Yeah.
In open loop systems, you often have one party investing and another one profiting. And then, of course, if there's no proper system of gain sharing, why should I help you earn money and I am investing in this? So, of course, it's not a proper win-win situation, is it? And if you don't remunerate me for my expenses, then it's gone. It's dead in that sense. But if there is a closed system, so let's say a terminal operating company operating also vessels, or a consignor also operating the transport operations, that could be an option.
So you're essentially saying, sorry for interrupting, Cyril. So you're essentially saying if there is one entity, let's call the AUTOFLEX entity, which owns and operates the ship, which owns and operates, in this case, the MDC, Mobile Distribution Center, which we talked about, and own and operate some of the other transport components, which we unfortunately do not have time to talk about today, then there will be incentivized sort of gain sharing. And
since you represent DFDS, and let's take Ghent, operating a vessel, inland vessel, operating trucks, operating the terminal. What's the problem in having cargo coming to Ghent, being transshipped on a DFDS vessel, transshipped by a DFDS facility in Ghent, let's say Ukraine or whatever, and then facilitating people coming to that location? It doesn't necessarily need to be the terminal premises. It can be, you know, some location next to it. But this is an extra service where DFDS is taking care that this LVL cargo, as we called it in the project, less than vessel load cargo, can be retrieved by the individual customers next to the Ghent terminal. So, you know, people producing something on the other side of the basin or whatever, people not traveling too far, profiting from the service, but the one who is providing the service does not need to be very diligent about, minute about the economies, because at some point it will all add up to one direction.
Yeah, so what you're saying that for each, I don't have to be very minute about my transshipment if I also can make money on my shipping, the transport itself, right? Yeah.
So in that end, it gives you more flexibility also to survive some difficult times sometimes. There will be fluctuations in cargo volumes and demand volumes, or the supply of additional units, like new containers required or new vessels even required. And you can bridge that somehow because it's within your company. Okay, even in terms of investment, since we're talking about the mooring thing, if you have to invest in a mooring thing, but it's profiting in that sense that your mooring is now safer or quicker or whatever, you would probably do that if it's just left pocket, right pocket, rather than...
but it's this. We heard a presentation this morning from Port of Rotterdam saying there's in terms of the uptake of sustainable fuels in maritime, and they say one of the big problems they are observing is, as you sort of hint out here, Cyril, if the ship owner and the ship operator is not the same. If you have to install a scrubber system, it's often the ship, and I don't know the details again, but let's just say it's often the ship owner who has to pay for it, but essentially the ship operator who benefits. If those two are not the same, there could be an issue there. What I will also say, just to challenge a little bit what you're saying, is that it doesn't necessarily have to be the same full ownership.
No.
It could also just be that we do gain sharing in a way that makes sense. For instance, what we've seen with the Masterly idea is Wilhelmsen and Kongsberg going together and saying, because this idea of the ROC, the Remote Operations Center, is a tricky one, who is liable, who is responsible. Well, we're doing a masterly entity, which is essentially owned by Kongsberg and Williamson together, and then masterly will be responsible. Then we get around liability issues.
Indeed.
That's my understanding, at least, from the technology acting a particular way, right?
And then in that sense, it's also a closed system, isn't it?
No, exactly. I'm just saying, like, the AUTOFLEX system could be owned by multiple parties.
Indeed.
You know,
I mean, even operation-wise, we discussed this when we designed it, or tried to design a transport service. Is that a direct service to Rotterdam? Since we're focusing on the western part of the Netherlands, it looks natural to think that we're talking about seaport hinterland transport, so we're flocking all to Rotterdam, which I'm sure the Port of Rotterdam loves to hear, that all kinds of small vessels and they are flocking to Rotterdam port and waiting for service. Great idea. Or is it more a feeder service to certain consolidation points where these different flows are consolidated to larger chunks, larger vessels, which then again means an additional transshipment. Somebody needs to pay this. And then larger units go to Rotterdam, which is better for the port, maybe even better for the liner service going to the port, for a shipping company, but not so well for the one consigning the cargo because he needs to pay an additional transshipment. Or is that an internal move that is not invoiced to the customer because it's more a type of, let's say, an optimization move within the company?
Yep.
See, there are different options how to do that. I'm not too smart. This is experience from. Oh, I'm very smart, but this is about experience from operators who were with us in the national project.
Yeah.
Said, okay, I don't care. I'm not going to invoice this because I'm collecting the cargo from the remote areas and then consolidating in Duisburg and Wesel and elsewhere, and then with big units shoving it to Rotterdam or Antwerp. And then for them, it's not a matter of invoicing it to the customer. If I don't have that system of operating a terminal, operating a liner service on the right, and a canal network services, so not owning all three parts, it doesn't really pay off. But for the one who does control all three, it does. And that can be one entity, or as you said, multiple entities.
Yeah, it's all controlled together.
Yeah.
We have to round this off because we were talking like for an hour and a half almost, I think.
We can do a break at least.
So let's end this by asking you, Cyril, why, to anyone listening to this, why should people care about the AUTOFLEX project?
We show people that it's more about technical innovation. It's much more about business ecosystems. I think it's one of the very few projects where we have a strong focus on how to make this fly on an operational and economic side. Okay, there's a lot of buzz also from DST with the vessel and the MDC and all the technical details, and we love to do that, of course. But I think the value, apart from all the excellence in those different areas, is to have a proper say what we think how business around automated vessels could work. And that's not that often these days. Huh? So, and then what I hear from the 10th framework program of the European Commission, that's going to be the focus. If it doesn't pay off or look like will be paying off one day, it's not going to be funded in the future. So this is an important string to show.
I think Cyril is only saying this because he knows that I'm the responsible one for developing the business models. So no putting it.
Yeah.
Cyril, thank you very much for. I'm going to give you my hand. That sounds
Thank you.
awfully formal, but thank you very much for wanting to talk to me. And yeah, I think that's a podcast for this time around.